The worst part wasn't hearing my mother tell Marcus's parents that I had commitment issues like a broken carousel horse. The worst part was the silence that followed, thick as Chicago fog rolling off Lake Michigan, while I stood frozen behind the kitchen door, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape my chest entirely. What happened next would change everything I thought I knew about love, family, and the person I'd convinced myself I had to be.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 26-year-old Olivia Chen-Rodriguez had perfected the art of almost engaged to her college boyfriend before she realized she was more in love with the idea of wedding planning than with him. Almost moved to Seattle for a dream marketing job before panic struck at 2 a.m. 3 days before her flight. Almost bought the cute Victorian apartment in Lincoln Park before deciding she wasn't ready for such a permanent commitment to a neighborhood. Her friends in Chicago had started calling her Maybe Olivia behind her back, though her best friend Sarah Martinez was kind enough to tell her to her face during one particularly brutal brunch at their usual spot in Wicker Park. Liv, I love you, but watching you date is like watching someone perpetually stand at the edge of a swimming pool, testing the water temperature with their toe for 3 hours instead of just jumping in, Sarah had said, stabbing her avocado toast with unnecessary force. Marcus is a good guy. He's patient, he's kind, he clearly adores you, and he makes you laugh until you snort wine out of your nose. What more are you waiting for? Olivia had stirred her oat milk latte counterclockwise exactly 15 times, a nervous habit she'd developed somewhere between her last relationship disaster and her current state of romantic limbo. It's not that simple, Sarah. You don't understand what it's like having parents who've been married for 32 years and still hold hands while watching Netflix. They have this epic love story that started when they were 19. How do you compete with that kind of certainty? The truth was more complicated than what she shared with Sarah. More complicated than what she'd even admitted to herself most days. Olivia's parents, Olivia Rodriguez and David Chen, had indeed crafted a beautiful marriage, but their love story cast a shadow that stretched across every relationship she'd ever attempted. Elena, a fiery literature professor from Guadalajara, had met David, a quiet engineering student from San Francisco's Chinatown, during their sophomore year at Northwestern University. Their courtship was the stuff of romantic comedies, love letters written in 3 languages, midnight study sessions that turned into sunrise conversations, a proposal during a snowstorm outside the campus library where they'd first kissed. Growing up in their Evanston home, Olivia had been surrounded by the evidence of their unwavering commitment. Photo albums chronicling 30 years of anniversaries, family vacations, and quiet Sunday mornings. Love notes still tucked into each other's lunch bags. The way her father's eyes still lit up when her mother walked into a room and her mother still blushed when he complimented her cooking. It was beautiful. It was also terrifying. Because what if she chose wrong? What if she settled for someone who was merely good instead of great? What if she woke up 10 years from now in a marriage that felt more like comfortable roommateship than the earth-moving, soul-deep connection her parents shared? These were the thoughts that kept Olivia awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling of her studio apartment in Andersonville, the apartment she'd lived in for 4 years because it was perfect for now, and moving seemed like such a big decision. The apartment where she'd ended 3 relationships and started 2, where she'd applied for 17 different jobs and accepted none of them. Where she'd written the beginnings of a novel that sat abandoned at chapter 3 because finishing it felt like committing to being the kind of person who actually completed things. Marcus Williams had entered her life 8 months ago through the most mundane of circumstances, a collision at Whole Foods that sent his organic kale flying into her cart of frozen dinners and Ben & Jerry's. He was tall, black with kind brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of easy smile that made you feel like you'd known him for years instead of seconds. A pediatric nurse at Northwestern Memorial had gentle hands and an even gentler way of making Olivia feel seen without being studied. Her first coffee date turned into a 4-hour conversation that meandered from their shared love of true crime podcasts to their completely opposite relationship with risk-taking. Marcus bungee jumped and tried new restaurants and booked weekend trips to cities he'd never visited. Olivia researched bungee jumping safety statistics, read 50 Yelp reviews before trying a new taco place, and planned vacations so thoroughly that she sometimes forgot to actually book them.
"You know what I love about you?" Marcus had said during their third date, as they walked along the lakefront path while autumn painted Chicago in shades of amber and rust. "You think about everything so carefully. You notice details other people miss, like how you remembered that I mentioned my nephew's birthday was coming up, and you found that perfect book about young doctors for him." What Marcus saw as thoughtfulness, Olivia experienced as paralysis, but his interpretation felt like a gift, a kinder story about herself than the one she usually told. Still, 8 months in, she could feel the familiar itch starting, the urge to find fault, to create distance, to protect herself from the vulnerability of being truly known. Marcus had started leaving a spare toothbrush at her apartment. He'd mentioned wanting her to meet his parents, who lived in a sprawling house in Oak Park and apparently made legendary Sunday dinners. He'd used the word future in casual conversation, as in, maybe next summer we could take that trip to Portugal you mentioned, or I think you'd love my cousin Janet when she visits from Atlanta next month. Each of these small intimacies felt simultaneously wonderful and suffocating, like wearing a sweater that was perfectly warm but maybe just a tiny bit too tight around the shoulders. Olivia's parents adored Marcus, which somehow made everything worse. Her mother had already started making extra portions of her famous mole verde whenever he came for dinner, and her father had begun sharing his prized collection of engineering disaster documentaries with him. They saw Marcus as the solution to what they perceived as Olivia's problem, her inability to settle down and give them grandchildren and a stable, predictable life story they could proudly share with their friends. "Mija, this one is different," her mother had whispered to her in Spanish after Marcus's third family dinner while they cleared dishes in the kitchen. "He sees you, really sees you, and he stays anyway." The anyway stung more than Elena probably intended. It was Tuesday, October 15th, when Marcus casually mentioned over their weekly pizza night that his parents were visiting Chicago the following weekend. "They're dying to meet you, Liv. My mom's been asking about the mysterious girlfriend who's stolen her baby boy's heart." He'd grinned, that easy smile that usually melted her reservations. "I thought maybe we could all have dinner together. Nothing fancy. Maybe that Italian place in Little Italy you love?" Olivia had felt the familiar flutter of panic in her chest, but she'd nodded and smiled and said yes, because saying no felt like admitting something she wasn't ready to examine too closely. Meeting parents was a milestone, a step toward something more permanent and real, a closing of doors to other possibilities she hadn't even considered yet. But Marcus looked so hopeful, so proud to show her off to the people who raised him, that she swallowed her reservations and started mentally preparing for what felt less like a dinner and more like an audition for the role of Marcus's serious girlfriend. She had no way of knowing that her own parents had been planning their own surprise for weeks, or that her mother's well-intentioned meddling would crack open every carefully constructed wall she'd built around her heart. She had no idea that in less than 1 week, everything she thought she knew about love, commitment, and her own capacity for courage would be turned completely upside down. For now, she was just maybe Olivia, testing the water temperature and trying to convince herself that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
The disaster began with her mother's homemade flan. Elena Rodriguez Chen had been perfecting her flan recipe for 3 decades, and she wielded it like a weapon of mass seduction whenever she wanted to make a good impression. When she announced on Thursday that she was making flan for Marcus's special dinner, Olivia should have known something was brewing in her mother's strategically brilliant mind.
"Mom, it's just a casual dinner. His parents are coming to meet me, not audition me for sainthood," Olivia had protested over the phone while trapped in Chicago traffic on the Kennedy Expressway, her Honda Civic inching toward downtown at the speed of continental drift. "Ah, mija, you don't understand. First impressions are everything. These people raised the man who loves my daughter. They deserve to see that we raise someone worthy of their son." The use of the word loves made Olivia's stomach flip. Marcus hadn't said those words yet, though they hung in the air between them like morning mist over Lake Michigan. Visible, tangible, but not quite ready to be acknowledged. What Olivia didn't know was that Alina had already been in contact with Marcus's mother, Patricia Williams, for 2 weeks. It had started innocently enough when Marcus mentioned his parents' visit within earshot of Alina during last Sunday's family dinner. One thing had led to another, phone numbers had been exchanged, and suddenly the two mothers were orchestrating what Alina called a proper introduction and what Patricia called finally getting to meet this mystery girl who's got our boy walking around like he's discovered electricity. The plan, as Alina explained it to her husband David while he graded structural engineering exams at their kitchen table, was simple. Invite Marcus's parents to their house in Evanston for dinner before the young couple's planned restaurant meeting. Just for appetizers and drinks, she'd said, to break the ice in a comfortable environment. David, who had learned over 32 years of marriage that resistance to his wife's social engineering projects was futile, had simply nodded and asked if he should pick up wine from their favorite shop in Little Italy. By Friday afternoon, Olivia was experiencing what she would later describe to Sarah as a full-body anxiety attack disguised as productivity. She'd reorganized her closet 3 times, researched conversation topics about pediatric nursing and whatever Marcus's father did for work, something involving logistics and shipping containers, and even practiced potential responses to common meeting the parents questions in her bathroom mirror. "Just be yourself," Marcus had texted her. "They're going to love you as much as I do." There it was again. That word. Love. Floating around like a butterfly she was afraid to catch because holding it too tightly might kill it, but letting it fly away felt like missing out on something magical. Saturday arrived with unseasonably warm October weather that had all of Chicago acting slightly manic with unexpected joy. Olivia had chosen her outfit with the precision of a military strategist. A navy blue dress that was professional but not uptight, interesting but not attention-seeking, the kind of dress that said, "I'm a responsible adult who would make an excellent daughter-in-law without screaming desperation." Marcus picked her up at 6 p.m., looking nervous himself, in a button-down shirt she'd never seen before, and cologne that was definitely new. "You look beautiful, Liv. Like, seriously beautiful. My parents are going to wonder how I got so lucky." They drove toward the Italian restaurant in Little Italy, Marcus's hand finding hers across the center console while he told her stories about his parents' quirks to calm her nerves. His father, Robert, was a retired logistics manager who built elaborate model train sets in their basement and could fix literally anything with duct tape and patience. His mother, Patricia, was a retired high school English teacher who still corrected people's grammar in casual conversation and made the best cornbread in 3 counties. "They sound wonderful," Olivia said, and meant it, but her palms were sweating despite the October chill seeping through the car windows. They were 2 blocks from the restaurant when Marcus's phone rang through the car's Bluetooth system. Patricia's voice filled the space between them, warm and slightly breathless. "Hi, sweetheart, change of plans. We're actually at your girlfriend's parents' house right now. Your father got the addresses mixed up when he put them in the GPS, and we ended up here instead of the restaurant. But Elena, oh, Olivia, your mother is just delightful. She insisted we come in for drinks and appetizers before dinner. She said you two were running a bit late anyway, so we thought we'd get acquainted." Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Her parents' house, her mother's territory, where every embarrassing childhood photo lived on proud display, where her mother felt most comfortable sharing what she considered charming stories about Olivia's quirks and habits. "Oh," was all she managed to say. "Isn't that nice?" Marcus squeezed her hand. "The parents are bonding. This takes all the pressure off dinner." If only he knew.
They pulled into the familiar driveway of the Evanston house, where Olivia had grown up, with its perfectly maintained garden that her father tended with engineering precision, and the front porch swing where she'd spent countless summer evenings reading novels and avoiding homework. The house looked the same as always, but somehow felt different, like a stage set for a performance she hadn't auditioned for. Marcus rang the doorbell, though Olivia had her own key. It felt more formal this way, more like the momentous occasion everyone seemed to think it was. Elena answered the door in her favorite burgundy blouse and the smile she reserved for company she wanted to impress. "Marcus! Olivia! Come in, come in! We're all just getting acquainted in the living room. Your parents are absolutely lovely, Marcus. Patricia and I were just comparing notes about raising children who were too smart for their own good." Olivia's anxiety spiked. Her mother comparing notes was never a good sign. They followed Elena through the familiar hallway lined with family photos, Olivia's school pictures, family vacations, her college graduation, and into the living room where her father, David, was deep in conversation with a tall, distinguished black man who had to be Marcus's father. The resemblance was unmistakable in the strong jawline and kind eyes. Patricia Williams rose from the couch as they entered, and Olivia immediately understood where Marcus got his warm smile. She was elegant in that effortless way some women possessed, with silver-streaked hair styled in a perfect bob, and the kind of posture that suggested decades of telling teenagers to sit up straight. "You must be Olivia," Patricia said, embracing her with a hug that smelled like vanilla and something floral. "Marcus has told us so much about you, though he failed to mention how absolutely beautiful you are." "Thank you, Mrs. Williams. It's so wonderful to meet you both." The introductions continued with Robert, who had Marcus's height and a handshake that spoke of years working with his hands. Everyone seemed genuinely delighted to meet everyone else, and for a moment, Olivia allowed herself to relax. Maybe this would be fine. Maybe her anxiety had been for nothing. Elena had laid out an impressive spread of appetizers on the coffee table: spinach and artichoke dip, her famous empanadas, and what looked like enough cheese and crackers to feed a small army. Wine glasses were filled, conversations were flowing, and the atmosphere was exactly the kind of warm, welcoming energy that made Olivia's childhood home feel like the coziest place on earth. It was Patricia who asked the innocent question that would change everything. "Elena, Marcus tells us that Olivia works in marketing, but I'd love to hear more about what she's passionate about. What lights her up? What are her dreams?" Olivia's felt her mother's pause like a shift in atmospheric pressure. Elena took a sip of her Pinot Grigio, and in that moment of silence, she knew with absolute certainty that disaster was approaching like a freight train she could see but couldn't stop. "Oh, Patricia," Elena said with the kind of laugh that mothers reserve for sharing what they think are endearing stories about their children. "You know, Olivia has so many interests. She's very exploratory. Always trying new things, starting new projects. She gets that from David's side of the family. They're all very thorough researchers." "That sounds wonderful," Patricia said encouragingly. "A curious mind is such a gift." "Yes, exactly. Although," Elena's voice took on the tone that every child recognizes as the precursor to public embarrassment, "we've learned to be patient with Olivia's timing when it comes to, well, committing to things. She likes to really think things through, very thoroughly. Sometimes maybe too thoroughly." Olivia felt Marcus's hand find hers, giving it a reassuring squeeze. He thought her mother was just being protective, sharing the kind of gentle teasing that all parents did. He had no idea what was coming. "Elena," David's voice carried a warning note that Olivia caught, but her mother missed entirely. "Oh, it's not a bad thing," Elena continued, warming to her subject in the way she did when she had an audience of new people to charm.
It's just that our Olivia has always had what you might call commitment issues. Like a broken carousel horse, you know? She goes around and around looking at all the options, but she has trouble picking just one and staying on it. The words hit the room like a meteor impact. Olivia felt her face flush hot with embarrassment and something deeper, a betrayal that cut straight through her chest. Marcus's hand went still in hers. Patricia and Robert exchanged a look that lasted approximately half a second too long. And in that moment of terrible silence, Olivia made a decision that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. She stood up. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I need some air." She walked towards the kitchen, towards the back door, towards escape. Behind her, she could hear Elena's voice, suddenly uncertain. "Mija? Olivia? Where are you? I was just explaining that you like to be careful about decisions." But Olivia was already stepping out into the October night, closing the door behind her, and finally listening to the voice inside her head that had been screaming for months that maybe it was time to stop being so afraid of making the wrong choice that she never made any choice at all. The catalyst had arrived, delivered by her own mother in the form of brutal honesty, wrapped in maternal love. And standing in her parents' backyard, under a canopy of stars, Olivia realized that for the first time in her adult life, she knew exactly what she wanted to do next. She wanted to run.
The 24-hour diner on Western Avenue had seen better decades. But at 11:47 p.m. on a Saturday night, it was exactly what Olivia needed. Anonymous, slightly grimy, and blessedly free of well-meaning parents and their devastating observations about her life choices. She'd been sitting in booth 7 for 3 hours, nursing her 4th cup of coffee and working through a stack of napkins that had become her impromptu journal. The waitress, a woman named Dolores with silver hair and tired eyes who'd stopped asking if she needed anything else around midnight, had wordlessly refilled her cup and left her alone with her thoughts. Her phone had buzzed 17 times, 12 calls from Marcus, 3 from her mother, 2 from her father. She'd turned it face down after reading Marcus's last text. "Liv, please call me. Whatever happened tonight, we can work through it. I'm not going anywhere." The problem was, she was already gone. Not physically, though she'd walked 13 blocks from her parents' house to this fluorescent-lit sanctuary, her navy dress wrinkled and her feet aching in the heels she'd chosen to impress people she'd never see again. But mentally, emotionally, spiritually, she'd left the moment her mother's words hit the air like a toxic cloud, commitment issues like a broken carousel horse. The accuracy of the description was what made it so devastating. Around 2 a.m., a revelation struck her with the force of Lake Michigan wind in February. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app, ignoring the notification showing 23 missed calls. Her fingers moved across the screen with unusual certainty. Things I've never finished. Novel, abandoned at chapter 3. Pottery class, quit after 4 sessions. Spanish lessons, stopped at intermediate level. Yoga teacher training, dropped out week 6 of 8. Relationship with Jake, ended when he mentioned moving in together. Relationship with Ethan, ended when he started talking about engagement. Relationship with David, ended when he said he loved me. Job at Thompson Marketing, quit before accepting permanent position. Apartment search, looked at 47 places, never put in an application. The list went on for 23 items. 23 almosts. 23 times she'd stood at the edge of commitment and chosen safety over growth, comfort over courage. But as the sun began to rise over Chicago's skyline, painting the diner windows in shades of gold and amber, Olivia realized something that felt like waking up from a dream she didn't know she had been having. She was tired of being afraid. Not just tired, exhausted. Bone deep, soul weary, exhausted from the constant mental gymnastics required to keep all her options open, to avoid making any decision that couldn't be easily undone, and to live in a perpetual state of maybe while watching everyone else around her build actual lives.
Sarah had gotten married last year. Marcus loved his job and was talking about buying a house. Her parents had built a beautiful life together through 30 years of daily choices to stay committed to each other and to their shared dreams. Even Dolores, the night shift waitress who'd been silently judging her coffee consumption, wore a wedding ring and had photos of grandchildren taped to the register. Everyone else was living their lives. Olivia was just waiting for hers to begin. At 6:15 a.m., she made a decision that felt simultaneously terrifying and inevitable. She was going to stop running away from commitment and start running toward it. All of it. Everything she'd been avoiding, postponing, or abandoning out of fear. She was going to finish things. The first call was to Marcus. He answered on the first ring, his voice thick with worry and sleeplessness. "Liv, thank God, where are you? I've been driving around looking for you since midnight. Your parents are worried sick, and Marcus, I'm okay. I'm at the diner on Western, the one near the used bookstore. I'm coming to get you." "Wait. Before you do, I need to tell you something. My mother was right. I do have commitment issues. Serious ones. I've spent my entire adult life running away from anything that felt permanent or real or scary. And I've hurt people because of it. I've hurt myself because of it." Silence on the other end. Then, "Okay, and I'm done. I'm done being afraid. I'm done making excuses, and I'm done letting fear make my decisions for me. I don't know if it's too late or if last night ruined everything, but I want to try. Really try. Not halfway, not with escape plans and backup options, but completely."
Another pause. When Marcus spoke again, his voice was softer. "What does that mean, Liv? What does trying look like?" "It means I want to meet your parents properly. It means I want to have the conversation about moving in together that we've been dancing around for months. It means I want to stop pretending that what we have isn't real and important and worth fighting for." "Are you sure? Because last night, when you walked out, I thought maybe your mom was right. Maybe you're just not ready for this kind of relationship." The old Olivia would have seized on that doubt, used it as proof that she should run, that commitment was too risky and she was right to be afraid. But the new Olivia, the one who'd been born somewhere between her second and third cup of diner coffee, felt something different. "I'm terrified," she said honestly, "but I'm more scared of waking up when I'm 40 and realizing I never actually lived my life. I never took risks or made hard choices or let myself be vulnerable enough to be truly happy." Where is this coming from? It's coming from 3 hours of thinking about all the things I've started and never finished, all the opportunities I've walked away from, all the ways I've chosen safety over growth. Marcus, you asked me 8 months ago what I was passionate about, and I gave you some bullshit answer about marketing and travel. But the truth is, I haven't been passionate about anything in years, because passion requires commitment, and commitment requires courage, and I've been a coward. She could hear him breathing, processing. In the background, she caught the sound of his car door closing. "I'm driving to you now. And Liv, for what it's worth, I don't think you're a coward. I think you're someone who's been hurt by the gap between expectations and reality, and you've been protecting yourself the only way you knew how." Maybe, but I don't want to protect myself anymore. I want to be brave. While she waited for Marcus, Olivia opened her notes app again and created a new list. Things I'm going to finish. This relationship, whatever that looks like. My novel, even if it sucks. A real conversation with my parents about boundaries. My job situation. Commit to Thompson or find something better. An actual permanent living situation. New things I'm going to start. Therapy, to figure out why I'm so afraid of permanence. Saying yes to plans I actually want to do. Having opinions about my own life. Making decisions based on what I want, not what's safest.
When Marcus walked through the diner doors 20 minutes later, looking rumpled and worried and beautiful in his concern for her, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Certainty. Not about the outcome. She had no idea if this relationship would work, if her parents would understand her newfound boundaries, or if she was capable of sustaining this level of emotional courage. But she was certain she wanted to try. "Hi," she said as he slid into the booth across from her. "Hi," he said back, reaching across the table to take her hands. "So, you want to have the moving in conversation?" "I want to have all the conversations. The scary ones, the uncomfortable ones, the ones about what we both actually want instead of what we think we're supposed to want." Marcus smiled then, the real smile that had made her fall for him in the produce section of Whole Foods. "Okay, but first, can we please go apologize to your parents? Your mom has been calling me every hour asking if you're safe, and I think your dad might actually drive around the city looking for you if we don't check in soon." "Yes. But Marcus?" "Yeah? When we go back there, I need you to know that I'm not the same person who walked out of that house last night. I don't know who I'm becoming yet, but I know I'm done being the person I was." He squeezed her hands. "I can't wait to meet her." For the first time in her adult life, Olivia wasn't afraid of the future. She was afraid with the future, afraid and excited, and committed to showing up for whatever came next. It felt like the difference between drowning and learning to swim. As they left the diner together, stepping out into a Chicago morning that felt full of possibility, Olivia realized that commitment wasn't about knowing how everything would turn out. It was about choosing to show up anyway, choosing to be present for your own life, even when, especially when, you couldn't control the outcome. She was finally ready to stop testing the water temperature and jump into the deep end. The question now was whether she could learn to swim fast enough to keep from drowning.
The first obstacle arrived disguised as her mother's good intentions, delivered over Tuesday morning coffee in Elena's kitchen, while David graded papers at Northwestern and the autumn sun streamed through windows that had witnessed 30 years of family conversations. "Mija, I've been thinking," Elena said, setting down her favorite ceramic mug, the one Olivia had made in high school pottery class and somehow actually finished, a rare victory in her adolescent war against commitment. Maybe what happened on Saturday was a blessing in disguise. Olivia looked up from her laptop, where she'd been working on Chapter 4 of her novel for the first time in 8 months. The words were coming slowly, like rusty water from an old pipe, but they were coming. "What do you mean?" "Well, Patricia and I have been talking." "Mom, no. And we think that maybe you and Marcus should take things slow. Really slow, like maybe just date for another year or two before you make any big decisions about living together or—" "Mom, stop." Olivia closed her laptop with more force than necessary. "We talked about this. Marcus and I are having dinner with his parents again this Friday, and we're going to discuss our relationship like adults, without anyone else's input." Elena's face shifted through 3 distinct expressions: surprise, hurt, and something that looked suspiciously like pride. "Since when do you not want my advice about relationships?" "Since I realized that your advice has been keeping me stuck in the same patterns for years." The words came out harsher than Olivia intended, but she didn't take them back. "Mom, I love you, but you and Dad have this perfect love story that makes everything else look like a consolation prize. Every time I start to commit to someone, you find reasons why they're not quite right, why I should wait for something better. That's not—" Elena slapped herself, recognition dawning in her dark eyes. Oh, Mija. "Yeah. Oh." They sat in silence for a moment, the kitchen suddenly feeling smaller and more fragile than Olivia remembered. Finally, Elena spoke quietly. "I thought I was protecting you from settling." "You are protecting me from living." The second obstacle came Thursday evening in the form of a panic attack that hit Olivia when she was standing in the bedding section of Target looking at duvet covers with Marcus like the domestically committed couple they were apparently becoming. One minute she was debating the merits of navy blue versus forest green, and the next she was hyperventilating between the throw pillows and sheet sets, her chest tight and her vision tunneling as if someone had suddenly sucked all the oxygen out of the store. Liv, what's wrong? Marcus stopped the duvet cover and reached for her hands, which were shaking like leaves in a windstorm. I can't. We're shopping for bedding, Marcus. Together. Like people who live together and make joint decisions about thread count and color schemes. The words tumbled out between gasps. What if we pick the wrong duvet cover? What if we get sick of looking at it every morning for the next 5 years? What if I wake up one day and realize I hate forest green and it ruins everything? Okay. Breathe with me. Marcus guided her to sit on a display bed, a queen-size setup, with at least 12 decorative pillows that some Target stylist had arranged to look like the kind of bedroom that belonged in a magazine. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. That's it. This is insane! I'm having a breakdown over bedding! Who does that? Someone who's been afraid of making decisions for so long that even picking out sheets feels like signing a marriage contract, Marcus said gently. It's okay. We don't have to buy anything today. But I want to. The admission surprised her. I want to pick out bedding with you and paint the bedroom walls and argue about whether we need blackout curtains or just regular ones. I want all of it. But my brain keeps telling me that wanting things is dangerous. An elderly woman pushing a cart full of Halloween decorations stopped to stare at them. 2 20-somethings having a relationship crisis in the home goods section, and Marcus smiled at her with the kind of easy charm that made strangers feel like friends. Young love, he said to the woman with a wink, we're picking out our first place together. The woman's stern expression melted into something almost maternal. Honey, she said to Olivia momentarily, I've been married for 43 years, and I can tell you that the secret isn't picking the perfect duvet cover. It's picking someone you don't mind looking at over coffee every morning, even when the duvet cover is ugly and you're both too tired to care. After she wheeled away, Marcus turned back to Olivia. Feel better? Actually, yes. But we're getting the navy blue. A forest green makes me think of hospitals. The third obstacle was more subtle, but somehow more threatening. The way her friends started treating her like a different person once word got out that she and Marcus were talking about moving in together.
I give it 6 months, Jenna whispered to Rachel during their usual Thursday night trivia at the hideout, apparently not realizing that Olivia could hear every word from her seat at the bar. She's never lasted longer than 8 months with anyone. Remember Jake? Remember Ethan? She's probably already planning her exit strategy. Maybe she's finally growing up, Rachel offered, but without much conviction. Or maybe she's forcing herself into something because she hit some arbitrary deadline. You know how she gets about proving points. Sarah, who had been Olivia's most loyal defender since college, finally turned around in her chair. You know she can hear you, right? The bar went quiet except for the 90s music playing overhead and the sound of Olivia's heart hammering against her ribs. She'd known her friends had opinions about her relationship patterns, but hearing it discussed like a betting pool was something else entirely. It's fine, Olivia said, surprising herself by meaning it. They're not wrong. I have a track record. The difference is that this time I'm aware of it, and I'm actively working to change it. Working how? Jenna asked, not unkindly, but not particularly gently either. Therapy. Real therapy, not just the 3 sessions I usually do before deciding the therapist doesn't get me. I started seeing Dr. Martinez on Monday. She specializes in attachment issues and commitment anxiety. Commitment anxiety is a real thing? Rachel asked, genuinely curious. Apparently. Who knew? Olivia managed to laugh. Turns out that growing up with parents who have an epic love story can make you feel like anything less than perfection is failure. And when you're terrified of failing, the safest option is never really trying. The conversation moved on to other topics.
Rachel's new job, Jenna's disaster of a Hinge date, Sarah's ongoing renovation project. But Olivia felt the shift in how they looked at her. There was surprise there and maybe a little skepticism, but also something that might have been respect. Dr. Carmen Martinez had been direct in a way that was both refreshing and terrifying. Commitment isn't about finding the perfect person or the perfect situation. It's about choosing to show up consistently for imperfect people in imperfect situations because the relationship itself has value. But what if I choose wrong? What if you choose right but convince yourself it's wrong because it's not exactly like your parents' relationship? That question had been haunting Olivia for 3 days. The fourth obstacle was practical and immediate. Her lease was up in 6 weeks, and Marcus's apartment, a 1-bedroom in Logan Square with exposed brick walls and a kitchen the size of a large closet, couldn't realistically fit 2 people's belongings without someone going insane. They'd spent Saturday afternoon apartment hunting, armed with a list of requirements that had started modest and grown increasingly specific as they visited places that were either too expensive, too small, too far from Marcus's hospital, or too close to elevated train tracks that rattled the windows every 12 minutes. "This is harder than I thought it would be," Olivia admitted, as they sat in Marcus's car outside their 7th disappointing viewing of the day. In movies, couples just decide to move in together and then montage their way into domestic bliss. Real life is messier, Marcus agreed, but also more interesting. In movies, you don't get to see the part where we spend 3 hours debating whether we really need a dining room or if we can eat at the kitchen counter like civilized people. Do we need a dining room? I have no idea. I've been eating cereal standing up in my kitchen for 2 years. They looked at each other and started laughing. The kind of deep, helpless laughter that comes from being overwhelmed and exhausted and still somehow happy to be overwhelmed and exhausted together. "We're going to figure this out," Marcus said when they caught their breath. "You sound very confident for someone whose girlfriend had a panic attack in Target over thread count." "I'm confident because my girlfriend recognized that she was having a panic attack over thread count and talked through it instead of running away. That's growth, Liv. That's what commitment actually looks like. Not perfection, but showing up for the messy parts." By Sunday evening, they'd found a place. A 2-bedroom apartment in Andersonville with hardwood floors, a working fireplace, and enough space for both of their stuff without requiring anyone to sleep in the living room. The rent was slightly more than either of them wanted to pay, the kitchen needed updating, and the upstairs neighbors apparently practiced tap dancing at midnight. It was imperfect. It was expensive. It was available immediately. "So," Marcus asked as they stood on the sidewalk outside the building, the lease application heavy in Olivia's hands, like a document that could change everything. "So," Olivia said, pulling out a pen, "let's do something imperfect together and see what happens." She signed her name with a flourish that surprised them both. Elena Rodriguez Chen would have told her to think about it for a few more days, to consider other options, to make sure she wasn't rushing into anything. But Elena wasn't here, and for the first time in her adult life, she was making a decision based on what she wanted, instead of what she was afraid of losing. It felt like jumping out of an airplane and discovering she'd been wearing a parachute all along.
The breakthrough came on a Tuesday in November, wrapped in the mundane packaging of a work presentation that Olivia had been avoiding for 3 weeks. She was sitting in the conference room at Thompson Marketing, surrounded by colleagues who had watched her dance around commitment for 2 years, about to present a comprehensive digital strategy for their biggest client, a campaign she'd actually finished. Not just started, not just outlined, not just researched to death while finding reasons to postpone the final recommendations. Finished. "Before we begin," said Janet Thompson, the agency's founder and the kind of woman who wore power suits like armor and made decisions with surgical precision, "I want to acknowledge something. Olivia, this is the first major campaign proposal you've seen through to completion since joining our team." The room went quiet. Olivia felt her cheeks flush, but instead of the familiar shame spiral that usually accompanied public recognition of her patterns, she felt something else. Pride. mixed with a determination that tasted like strong coffee and possibility. "You're right," Olivia said, standing up straighter. "And I want to explain why this one is different, because it matters for how we move forward." She clicked to her first slide, which wasn't about market demographics or conversion rates, but about something more fundamental: the psychology of decision-making under uncertainty. "For the past 2 months, I've been in therapy working on my relationship with commitment and completion," she said, watching her colleagues' faces register surprise at her directness. "What I've learned is that perfectionism isn't about having high standards. It's about being so afraid of making the wrong choice that you never make any choice at all." Janet leaned forward, intrigued. "And how does this apply to the Morrison account?" "Because Morrison Industries isn't looking for a perfect marketing strategy. They're looking for a strategy that works, that they can implement, that will drive real results, even if it's not theoretically optimal." She clicked to the next slide, which showed a comprehensive 6-month campaign that was ambitious but achievable, creative but grounded in data. "This proposal isn't perfect, but it's complete, it's actionable, and it's designed for a company that needs to move forward rather than endlessly optimize." What followed was the best presentation of Olivia's career, not because the strategy was revolutionary, though it was solid, but because she defended it with the confidence of someone who had done the work, made the hard choices, and was prepared to stand behind her decisions. The social media component focuses on LinkedIn and Instagram rather than TikTok, because Morrison's target demographic is professionals aged 28 to 45, not Gen Z. Yes, TikTok has more engagement potential, but we're optimizing for qualified leads, not viral moments. "What about budget allocation?" asked Tom Richardson, the account director who had a reputation for poking holes in junior team members' proposals. 60% digital advertising, 30% content creation, 10% influencer partnerships. I know conventional wisdom says 50-50, but Morrison's data shows their customers respond better to direct advertising than branded content. We can test and adjust quarterly, but I recommend we start with what their analytics are actually telling us. The questions kept coming, and Olivia kept answering with specificity and conviction that surprised everyone in the room, including herself. She had data to back up every recommendation, alternatives for every potential objection, and a timeline that accounted for both ideal conditions and realistic delays. "Outstanding work," Janet said when the presentation ended. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need more of. Olivia, I'd like to discuss expanding your role here. Can you stay after the meeting?" As her colleagues filed out, several stopping to offer genuine congratulations, Olivia felt a sensation she'd been chasing her entire adult life: the quiet satisfaction of having seen something through to completion, of having made decisions and stood behind them, of having created something valuable through persistence rather than just inspiration. "I'm promoting you to senior marketing strategist with a 20% salary increase and your own team. But more importantly, I'm giving you the Morrison account to manage through implementation. You built the strategy. You should see it through to results." "Are you sure? I mean, my track record here hasn't exactly..." "Your track record is changing. The question is, are you ready to change with it?" Olivia thought about the apartment she and Marcus had spent the weekend painting, the bedroom walls now a warm gray that looked different in morning light than evening light, but somehow worked perfectly for both. She thought about the novel she'd been writing 15 minutes every morning before coffee, slowly but steadily building toward what might actually become a complete first draft. She thought about her therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez, where she was learning to distinguish between healthy caution and paralyzing fear. "Yes," she said, without hesitation, "I'm ready." The real breakthrough, though, came that evening when she got home to find Marcus assembling a bookshelf in their living room, with their couch and their shared collection of novels and his medical journals mixed with her marketing books, and the throw pillows they'd finally chosen after 3 Target visits and 1 panic attack. "How was work?" he asked, looking up from the instruction manual he'd spread across the coffee table like battle plans.
I got promoted, and I said yes without asking for time to think about it. Marcus set down his screwdriver and grinned. That's my commitment-phobic girlfriend. How does it feel? Terrifying and amazing and like I might throw up from excitement. Olivia flopped onto the couch, watching him sort tiny wooden dowels and metal brackets with the same methodical patience he brought to everything. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for my brain to come up with 17 reasons why accepting the promotion was a mistake. And
nothing. Just excitement. Is that normal? For someone who's been practicing making decisions and living with them? Yeah, that's normal. He held up 2 identical-looking screws. Can you tell the difference between these? Olivia examined them carefully. This one is slightly longer. Why? Because I've been staring at them for 20 minutes trying to figure out which one goes where, and I was about to give up and just use whichever one fit. He laughed. Maybe you're not the only one who overthinks things. Are you seriously having furniture assembly anxiety? I want our first major furniture purchase to be perfect. I want this bookshelf to be level and stable and exactly what we imagined when we picked it out. He stopped, recognition dawning on his face. Oh, I'm doing the thing. You're doing the thing. They looked at each other and started laughing. The same helpless, stress-relieving laughter that had gotten them through apartment hunting and paint selection, and the awkward second dinner with his parents, where Patricia had apologized for Elaine's comments, and Elena had apologized for Patricia's apology. Okay, Marcus said, picking up the longer screw. I'm going to use this one, and if it's wrong, we'll take the whole thing apart and start over. That's very wise and mature of you. I learned it from my girlfriend, who's been teaching me that sometimes good enough is better than perfect, and done is better than optimal. The screw fit perfectly. The bookshelf went together without a single do-over, and by bedtime they had a piece of furniture that was theirs. Not his or hers, but theirs, filled with books they'd chosen together and positioned exactly where they'd both agreed it should go. But the real breakthrough came later, when they were lying in bed under the navy blue duvet cover that no longer felt like a symbol of permanent commitment, but just like bedding they both happened to like. Marcus, Olivia said into the darkness of their bedroom, I think I'm falling in love with you. She felt him go still beside her. Think? No, I know I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I'm pretty sure I've been in love with you for months, but I was too scared to admit it because loving someone means giving them the power to hurt you. And now? Now, I think maybe giving someone the power to hurt you is worth it, if it also gives them the power to make you happier than you knew you could be. Marcus rolled over to face her in the dim light filtering through their bedroom window. Olivia Chen-Rodriguez, I have been completely, absolutely, head over heels in love with you since our second date, when you spent 20 minutes explaining why Die Hard is actually a Christmas movie. I've been waiting for you to catch up. I love you too, Marcus Williams, completely and absolutely, and without backup plans or exit strategies. That might be the sexiest thing you've ever said to me. Just wait until you hear my 5-year plan for this relationship. You have a 5-year plan? I have a 5-year plan, a backup plan for the 5-year plan, and a contingency plan for if we decide we hate the backup plan. She grinned in the darkness. But for the first time in my life, all of those plans involved the same person. They made love that night with a tenderness that felt like celebration and gratitude, and the quiet joy of 2 people who had finally stopped running from each other and towards something neither of them could fully predict or control. Later, as Marcus slept beside her, and Chicago hummed its late-night symphony outside their windows, Olivia lay awake not with anxiety, but with anticipation. For the first time in her adult life, she was excited about the future, not because she knew exactly how it would unfold, but because she was no longer afraid to find out. The breakthrough hadn't been dramatic or sudden. It had been quiet and gradual, and built from dozens of small choices to stay instead of leave, to finish instead of abandon,
to love instead of protect. It felt like learning to breathe underwater, discovering that the thing she'd been most afraid of was actually the thing that would save her. Tomorrow, she would start managing the Morrison account. Tomorrow, she would write another 15 minutes of her novel. Tomorrow, she would wake up next to Marcus in their shared bed, in their shared apartment, and make coffee with their shared coffee maker. Tomorrow, she would continue the work of becoming someone who finished what she started. But tonight, she was simply happy. Completely, absolutely, and without reservation.
The crisis arrived on a Thursday in February, disguised as an opportunity that should have been everything Olivia had ever wanted. She was sitting in her newly decorated office at Thomson Marketing, reviewing quarterly reports for the Morrison account, which had exceeded every projected metric and was being held up as a case study for the entire agency, when her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize, but a voice she'd never forgotten. Olivia Chen-Rodriguez? This is Rebecca Martinez from Steinberg & Associates in New York. I'm calling about a position that I think might interest you. Steinberg & Associates, the marketing firm that represented Fortune 500 companies and had offices in 12 countries and was basically the Harvard of advertising agencies. Olivia had applied there straight out of college and been rejected so thoroughly that the form letter had felt personal. We've been following your work on the Morrison Industries campaign, Rebecca continued, her voice crisp with Manhattan efficiency. Frankly, we're impressed. We have an opening for a creative director position, a newly created role overseeing international campaigns for our tech sector clients. The salary is $180,000, plus benefits and relocation assistance to Manhattan. Are you interested in discussing this further? Olivia's coffee mug slipped from her hands, sending lukewarm coffee across her desk and soaking into the Morrison reports she'd been reviewing. $180,000? Creative director? New York City? Everything she'd thought she wanted when she was 22 and believed that success meant escaping the Midwest for somewhere that felt more like the center of the universe. Yes, of course I'm interested in hearing more, she managed, grabbing napkins to mop up the coffee while her mind raced through possibilities and complications in equal measure. Excellent. Can you fly out next Tuesday for interviews? We'd like to move quickly on this. The right candidate could start as early as next month. Next month? Olivia looked around her office, the framed photo of her and Marcus from their weekend trip to Door County, the succulent plant he'd given her when she got promoted, and the whiteboard covered with strategies for campaigns she was actually excited to implement. 4 months ago, this call would have felt like salvation. Now it felt like a test she wasn't sure she wanted to pass. Yes, she heard herself say. Tuesday works. The conversation ended with details about flights and hotels and interview schedules, but Olivia barely processed them. She was too busy feeling like she'd accidentally opened a door that led to a completely different life, one that would require leaving behind everything she'd just learned to value. She didn't tell Marcus about the call until that evening, after they'd made dinner together in their kitchen, pasta with vegetables that Marcus had somehow convinced her to try, eaten at the small table they'd found at a thrift store and refinished themselves. She waited until they were cleaning dishes, when the routine domestic rhythm might soften the blow of what felt like a betrayal of everything they'd built together. I got a call today, she said, scrubbing a stubborn bit of marinara sauce from a plate with unnecessary force. From a marketing firm in New York? Marcus, who had been drying a wine glass with careful attention, went very still. Okay. What kind of call? A job offer. Well, an interview for a job offer. Creative director at Steinberg & Associates. It's a really big deal, Marcus. The kind of opportunity that most people in marketing would kill for. And I said yes to the interview. The wine glass in Marcus's hands seemed to hang suspended in time before he set it down on the counter with deliberate gentleness. When? Tuesday. I fly out Tuesday morning. This Tuesday? As in 5 days from now? I know it's fast. I know it's complicated. But Marcus, this is Steinberg & Associates. They have offices in London and Tokyo and Sao Paulo. The campaigns they run win awards that people frame and put on their walls. This isn't just a job. It's a career that could change everything. Everything, Marcus repeated quietly. Including us? That's not... we'd figure it out.
Long distance isn't impossible. New York is only a 3-hour flight from Chicago. We could... Liv? Marcus turned to face her fully, and something in his expression made her stomach drop. Are you seriously considering taking a job in New York 4 months after we moved in together? After everything we've built here? I don't know. I don't know what I'm considering because I haven't even interviewed yet. But yes, I'm considering it. How could I not consider it? Because you have a life here. Because you have a relationship here that you claimed you wanted to commit to. Because you just got promoted to a job you love, working on campaigns that are actually making a difference for real companies. And because I have all that, I can't be curious about other opportunities. I can't explore what else might be possible. Of course you can explore, but exploring and planning to uproot your entire life are different things. The fight that followed was their first real fight. Not a disagreement about paint colors or whose turn it was to buy groceries, but a fundamental clash about what commitment meant and whether it was possible to grow within a relationship or whether growth required leaving everything familiar behind. This is exactly what your mother was talking about, Marcus said, the words coming out sharper than he probably intended. You get comfortable with something, and then you immediately start looking for the exit. That's not fair.
Isn't it? 4 months ago, you were having panic attacks about buying bedding because it felt too permanent. Now you're ready to move to a different city for a job you haven't even interviewed for? This isn't about running away. This is about opportunity. This is about not letting fear make my decisions. Or maybe this is about using opportunity as an excuse to avoid the scary parts of actually building a life with someone. The worst part was that she couldn't tell the difference anymore between healthy ambition and old patterns dressed up in professional clothing. They went to bed angry that night, lying side by side in the navy blue sheets that had once represented such a milestone, but now felt like evidence of how quickly security could turn into something that felt like a trap. The interview process was even more seductive than Olivia had imagined. Steinberg and Associates occupied 4 floors of a Manhattan skyscraper with views of Central Park and conference rooms that looked like they had been designed for movie scenes about powerful people making important decisions. The team she met was brilliant and diverse and passionate about work that reached millions of people across continents. "We see you as someone who could really grow with us," said James Steinberg himself during her final interview. "The sky's the limit here for someone with your strategic mind and your willingness to take calculated risks." The offer, when it came Wednesday evening, while she was sitting in her hotel room overlooking the glittering chaos of Times Square, was even better than the initial phone call had suggested. $190,000. Full relocation package, stock options, a team of 12 direct reports, and campaigns for companies she'd admired from afar for years. "We need an answer by Friday," Rebecca Martinez had said. "I know it's fast, but we're moving quickly to build this department, and, frankly, you're our first choice." Olivia stared out at the city lights and felt herself standing at the edge of 2 completely different futures. In one, she stayed in Chicago with Marcus and her comfortable job and the life they'd been building together. Safe, predictable, known. In the other, she moved to New York and threw herself into the kind of career that required everything she had. Risky, demanding, unknown. The old Olivia would have called Sarah, called her parents, made lists of pros and cons, and researched average rent prices in Manhattan, and looked for reasons to either definitely go or definitely stay. The new Olivia, the one who had learned to make decisions and live with them, found herself simply sitting with the uncertainty and waiting to see what felt true. But when she called Marcus that night, the conversation confirmed her worst fears about what this opportunity was doing to them. "So," he said, his voice careful and distant, "they offered me the job. $190,000, full relocation package, my own team." Silence. Then, "Congratulations." "Marcus, don't be like that." "How should I be, Liv?
Happy that my girlfriend is planning to move to New York? Excited about going back to long-distance dating? Thrilled that the moment you get offered something bigger, you're ready to walk away from everything we've built? I haven't decided anything yet. Haven't you? You flew to New York for the interview. You're considering an offer that would require you to leave in 3 weeks. It sounds like you've decided and you just don't want to admit it. That's not... This isn't about you, Marcus. This is about my career. Everything is about us now, Olivia. That's what commitment means. That's what living together means. Your career decisions affect me just like mine affect you. We're supposed to make these choices together. So, I'm supposed to turn down the opportunity of a lifetime because it's inconvenient for our relationship? You're supposed to care enough about our relationship to talk to me before seriously considering opportunities that would end it. The line went quiet except for the sound of both of them breathing and the distant noise of New York traffic 40 floors below. Maybe, Marcus said finally, his voice thick with something that sounded like grief. Maybe your mom was right about the commitment thing. Maybe you're just not ready for this. Maybe I'm not, and I realized as the words left my mouth that I had no idea if I was being honest or just trying to hurt him the way he'd hurt me. When the call ended, she sat in her hotel room and cried. For the first time in months, not from anxiety or fear, but from the terrible realization that getting everything you thought you wanted sometimes meant losing everything you'd learned to value. She had 48 hours to decide between 2 versions of herself, the one who prioritized security and love, or the one who prioritized growth and achievement. Both felt true. Both felt impossible. And for the first time since that night in the diner, when she decided to stop running from commitment, Olivia had no idea what the right choice looked like.
The answer came to Olivia at 3:47 a.m. on Friday morning. Not in her Manhattan hotel room, but in the emergency waiting room at Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where she'd flown back to Chicago on the red-eye after getting Sarah's frantic call about Marcus. "Car accident," Sarah had said, her voice tight with worry. "He's okay, but he's hurt. Concussion, broken ribs, surgery for internal bleeding. Olivia, you need to come home." Home. The word hit her like lightning, illuminating a landscape she'd been stumbling through in darkness. Not back to Chicago, not back to her apartment, not back to her life. Home. She'd spent the 6-hour flight from JFK to O'Hare writing and rewriting a text message to Rebecca Martinez that would decline the Steinberg offer, then deleting it and starting over. But sitting in the harsh fluorescent light of the hospital waiting room, still wearing the expensive blouse she'd chosen for her final interview, watching Patricia and Robert Williams hold each other while they waited for news about their son, Olivia finally understood what Dr. Martinez had been trying to tell her about commitment. It wasn't about choosing the safe option or the risky option. It wasn't about picking the perfect path and sticking to it no matter what. It was about choosing what you couldn't bear to lose and then showing up for it every day, especially on the days when showing up was difficult or inconvenient or required sacrificing other things you wanted. At 4:15 a.m., Dr. Elizabeth Chen, no relation despite the shared surname, emerged from surgery looking tired but relieved. "He's going to be fine," she announced to the small group that had gathered. "The surgery went well, and while recovery will take time, there shouldn't be any lasting complications." Olivia felt her legs give out with relief, and Patricia caught her arm with the kind of maternal instinct that transcended the awkwardness of their complicated history. "You love him," Patricia said quietly, "and it wasn't a question." "More than I knew how to admit until right now," Olivia whispered back. When she was finally allowed to see Marcus, groggy from anesthesia, but alert enough to squeeze her hand, he looked at her with surprise and something that might have been hope. "You came back," he said, his voice rough from the breathing tube. "Of course I came back. Where else would I be? New York, maybe? Starting your new job with your new team in your new life?" Olivia pulled up the visitor's chair as close to his hospital bed as the medical equipment would allow and took his hand in both of hers. "Marcus, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me, because I've never been more certain of anything in my life."
He waited, his brown eyes focused on her face with the intensity of someone who had just survived something that could have ended everything. I turned down the job. Not because of the accident. I was going to call them this morning anyway. I turned it down because somewhere between panicking about duvet covers and fighting about what commitment means, I figured out that I don't want the biggest career in the world if it means not coming home to you every night. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, processing. You turned down Steinberg and Associates. I turned down Steinberg and Associates. A $190,000 salary and your own team and offices in 12 countries. I turned down all of it. Why? Olivia had been preparing for this question since the moment she'd made the decision, but now that she was here, looking at the man she loved lying in a hospital bed because life was unpredictable and precious and finite, the answer was simpler than all the reasons she'd been rehearsing. Because when Sarah called me about your accident, the first thing I thought wasn't, I have to get back to Chicago, or I have to help Marcus. It was, I have to get home. And I realized that home isn't a place, or a job, or even a relationship. Home is the life you build with someone that feels worth protecting and choosing every single day. Tears were rolling down Marcus's cheeks now, despite the pain medication that was supposed to be keeping him calm and drouthy. Liv, you don't have to give up amazing opportunities for me. We could have figured something out. Maybe we could have. But I didn't want to figure something out. I wanted to choose you. I wanted to choose us. I wanted to choose the life we're building together over the theoretical life I might build somewhere else. What about your career? What about growth and not letting fear make your decisions? Olivia smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. My career is actually pretty great right here. Janet offered me a partnership track yesterday. Apparently, the Morrison success has people talking, and Thompson wants to expand into tech sector marketing. As for growth, I'm learning that sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is grow deeper instead of just growing bigger. Over the next 3 days, while Marcus recovered enough to come home, Olivia had conversations that felt like clearing the air after a storm. With Rebecca Martinez, who was disappointed but professional about her decision. With Janet Thompson, who was thrilled to discuss the partnership opportunity and what it would mean for Olivia's role at the agency. With her parents, who surprised her by being proud of her choice rather than worried about missed opportunities. Mija, when I said you had commitment issues, I was wrong. You didn't have trouble committing. You had trouble trusting yourself to choose well. There's a difference. What's the difference? Someone with commitment issues runs away when things get difficult. Someone who doesn't trust their own judgment runs away when they think they might have chosen wrong. You stayed and figured out what was actually worth choosing. The real test came 2 weeks later when Marcus was mobile enough to have serious conversations and they could finally address the damage their fight had done to their relationship. I'm sorry, Olivia said as they sat together on their couch, Marcus's ribs still wrapped, but his head clear and his hand steady in hers. I'm sorry for not talking to you before I went to New York. I'm sorry for making a decision that would have affected both of us without considering what it would mean for us. I'm sorry too, Marcus said. I was scared and I handled it badly. I made it sound like wanting opportunities was wrong, and that's not what I meant. I couldn't imagine my life without you in it, and I panicked. For what it's worth, I couldn't imagine my life without you either. That's why I came home. They talked for hours that day about what commitment meant to each of them, about how to support each other's ambitions without losing themselves or each other, about the difference between being afraid of growth and being intentional about the direction that growth takes. I want us to have a plan, Olivia said. Not a rigid plan, but a vision of what we're building together, because I think part of why the New York opportunity felt so tempting was that I didn't have a clear picture of what staying could look like. What do you want it to look like? Olivia had been thinking about this question for weeks, and the answer felt both ambitious and grounded, both exciting and achievable.
I want to build something here. The partnership at Thompson, yes, but also something bigger. I want us to buy a house with a yard where we can have people over and maybe get that dog I've been researching for 3 years. I want to finish my novel and actually try to get it published. I want to plan a vacation to Portugal and actually take it.
I want to have hard conversations with my parents about boundaries and then invite them over for Sunday dinner anyway.
That sounds like a beautiful life.
I want to marry you, she added, the words coming out in a rush before she could second-guess them. Not right now. Not because of the accident or because I'm trying to prove something, but because I want to keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life, and I want to do it officially. Marcus laughed, the first real laugh she'd heard from him since before the accident.
Olivia Chen-Rodriguez,
are you proposing to me? I'm expressing intent to eventually propose, or to be proposed to, or to have a mutual conversation about engagement that leads to mutual proposal planning. That might be the most you thing you've ever said. Is that good or bad?
It's perfect, Marcus said, kissing her forehead, and yes, I want to marry you too. When we're both ready, when it feels right, when we've figured out how to do this partnership thing well enough that we want to make it permanent.
6 months later, Olivia stood in the backyard of the house they'd bought in Oak Park, a 1920s bungalow with original hardwood floors and a kitchen that needed updating, and a garden that David had already volunteered to help them plan. She was holding a glass of champagne and watching Marcus tell the story of his proposal to their friends and family, how he'd hidden the ring in the pages of her finished novel manuscript and waited for her to find it. The best part, Marcus was saying to the crowd gathered for their engagement party, is that she actually finished the book. She wrote "The End" and then found a diamond ring taped to the last page. And, Sarah called out, grinning, and she said yes before she even looked at the ring properly, which is good because I was terrified she was going to want to research engagement ring statistics for 3 weeks before deciding. Olivia laughed, looking around at the faces of everyone who mattered most to her, her parents beaming with pride that had nothing to do with the size of her engagement ring and everything to do with the person she'd become. Marcus's parents, who had long since forgiven Elena's disastrous dinner party commentary and now treated Olivia like the daughter they'd always hoped for. Her friends, who had stopped making bets about when she'd run and started making bets about whether she'd actually let them plan her a bachelorette party. Dr. Martinez, who had become more friend than therapist, as Olivia's sessions had evolved from crisis management to maintenance check-ins, had been right about commitment. It wasn't about finding the perfect person or making the perfect choice. It was about finding someone worth choosing imperfectly, consistently, generously, and then doing the work every day to deserve that choice. "Speech!" someone called out, and Olivia found herself standing up without the familiar flutter of panic that used to accompany any kind of public attention. I'm not good at speeches, which got a laugh from people who knew her well, but I wanted to say something about commitment, since that's apparently my thing now. She looked at Marcus, who was watching her with the same expression of proud affection he'd worn the day she presented the Morrison campaign and every day since. For most of my life, I thought commitment meant closing doors. I thought it meant limiting options and settling for less than everything I might want. What I learned, what this man taught me, is that commitment actually means opening the door to everything you actually want and walking through it with someone who makes you brave enough to want it in the first place. She raised her glass to the group of people who had loved her through her uncertainty and were celebrating her certainty. So, here's to choosing well and choosing often and choosing the same person every day, even when they leave dirty dishes in the sink and steal the covers and make you watch medical documentaries that give you nightmares. "Hey!" Marcus protested good-naturedly. And here's to everyone who believed I could learn to stop running towards something better and start building something real. Thank you for not giving up on me while I figured out how not to give up on myself. As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, Olivia and Marcus stood together in their backyard, looking at the house they'd bought and the life they'd built and the future they were planning together. "No regrets?" Marcus asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "About what? New York? Steinberg and Associates? The road not taken?" Olivia leaned back against his chest and considered the question seriously. Did she wonder sometimes about what that other life might have looked like? Of course. Did she miss anything about the certainty of being unattached, of keeping her options open, of never having to consider another person's feelings when making major decisions? Honestly, no. The only thing I regret, she said finally, is how long it took me to figure out the thing I was most afraid of losing was the thing most worth keeping. They went inside together, turning off lights and loading the dishwasher, and arguing gently about whether they needed to wash the champagne glasses tonight or could leave them until morning. The kind of domestic negotiation that used to feel like a trap and now felt like evidence of a life lived in partnership with someone who knew her well enough to love her anyway. In their bedroom, as they got ready for sleep, in the routine they'd developed over months of choosing each other daily, Olivia caught sight of herself in the mirror and was surprised by what she saw. A woman who looked settled in the best possible way, grounded but not stagnant, committed but not constrained. She looked like someone who had learned the difference between running towards something and running away from something, and had finally chosen to run towards everything that mattered most to her. As she drifted off to sleep next to Marcus in their shared bed, in their shared house, in the life they'd built together through thousands of small choices and several large ones, Olivia's last thought was that this ordinary, extraordinary, imperfect, beloved life was exactly what she'd been looking for all along. She just hadn't been brave enough to build it until now.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.